that's what you want to do.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Tech Talk with Bill Baer. My name is Dan Holme. I'm CEO and co-founder of IT Unity. And with me today, as always, on Tech Talk is Bill Baer, Senior Technical Product Manager at Microsoft. Welcome, Bill. I don't think we're getting sound for you quite yet.
All right, hold on.
There we go. Gotcha. Good morning.
All right.
I can't imagine you've had a really calm, relaxing morning today, Bill.
No, not. It's been busy. It's been a busy morning. We've had a lot, obviously, going on this morning. Perhaps still more to come as we kind of progress through the afternoon. Apologies if my audio is not super. I am in a different environment today than I normally am. So here we are in Redmond in the office.
You actually have an office. I was starting to think you were just sort of pulling a Capricorn experiment on us by calling in from home every Friday.
I'll give you tours. So you've got a monkey.
All
kinds of
stuff. Well, fantastic. Well, we've got a wonderful group of people here who've all joined at the last minute after the announcement of the SharePoint Server 2016 IT preview this morning. And Bill has been nice enough to give us his time to take a look at the preview and see what's in it for not only IT, as this is primarily meant to be a preview for IT, but also some of the little surprises that he's been teasing us about on previous episodes of
Dan, I think you froze. Maybe if I sit really still, it won't look as awkward. All right, well, we...
Tech Talk. So, Bill, how do you want to approach the day and sharing the great news with them?
Yeah, so this morning we announced SharePoint Server 2016 IT preview. You know, as I said last week at SharePoint Fest and on previous Tech Talks, we did know how many days were left in August. We knew it only had 31 of them, so we did as much as we possibly could in order to get this release out to you. So it was a pretty exciting morning because we landed a couple of things. First of all, we landed SharePoint Server 2016 IT preview. In addition, in parallel, we also landed some documentation, both on TechNet as well as some downloads that we distributed via our social channels a little bit earlier today. A reviewer's guide, which encapsulates some of the high-level feature investments that we've made in IT preview, in addition to a data sheet, which is kind of a shorter version of the reviewer's guide that you can leave with customers, or if you're in a hurry, you can just take a look at that. And then the last thing was a quick start guide. And effectively what the quick start guide was intended to do was really to help you get up and running very quickly with IT preview. So, you know, the first question is what is an IT preview? Well, IT preview largely encompasses the IT or the infrastructure investments that we've been making over the course of the past several months. And we talked on a previous Tech Talk about why we opted to land preview in the way that we did. And largely what we're trying to do is, one, we want to be able to validate those core foundational investments that we're making from a SharePoint perspective. So those investments largely that accrue back to the infrastructure side or the IT professionals. So deployment, implementation, scale, reliability. And in addition to that, just overall deployment and upgrade concepts that we really wanted an opportunity to validate and have a good long duration of time that we can attain feedback, while in parallel we can work on some of the experiences related to SharePoint Server 2016. So as opposed to trying to ship a product that's 20% complete and then hope to attain validation across that, we decided to focus on targeted areas. And as we move through subsequent releases, that's when we'll start to highlight or light up some of the experiences investments that would be more end user focused. You know, one of the other things as well is it's not only infrastructure improvements that we've built into preview as well. Like I said, you're going to discover a number of things. If you're a developer, you're going to find that common consent now is in SharePoint Server 2016 preview. So there's a lot of opportunity in these releases beyond just what you're seeing. And then obviously, in addition to that, we have features and capabilities that perhaps haven't yet been documented that you may be able to discover in this particular build. So there's a lot of work that we've gotten through to get us to this point, and there's still a lot of work moving ahead. And we've still got a couple of things coming related to preview as well. So this morning was just kind of that first barrage of information, and then as we move forward, we'll have a couple of other things as well.
Wonderful. Bill, you said, I think this is something we talked about on a previous Tech Talk, but we've got a nice big group here today. But you said this really is about it being an IT preview, that this is about us having an opportunity to explore things like deployment, migration, infrastructure. What are some of the things that we as customers can do as we put this into our test environments what are some of the scenarios you really want us to test? What can we do to help make this a better product when it releases?
I think predominantly what we want to see out of this particular release is validation of deployment and upgrade. Those are kind of the two core constructs that we're very interested in because we want that to be as resilient an experience as possible, just getting the product deployed and then getting upgrades running as well. In addition, then the third pillar would be scalability. We really want to test the boundaries related to SharePoint 2016. So, you know, definitely deploy in a farm topology if you're just and test some of those boundaries and give us an idea of where they're at. So, if you have large databases or large lists today in prior versions of SharePoint, go ahead and give those a test. Bob mentions MinRole. So MinRole is one of those concepts that's been evolving quite a bit since we announced it at Ignite. So we've changed the names of some of the roles, which is just smaller administrivia, but we've also made some changes to the code behind. So MinRole is definitely another concept that we want you to look at.
And you mentioned some of the scalability boundaries, and last week we were both lucky enough to be at SharePoint Fest in Seattle, where you talked a little bit about the preview that now today is released. Some of the scalability boundaries that have changed, you mentioned, were site collections per content database, list size, and maximum upload size. Do you want to talk about those three boundaries specifically, and maybe what you think we might be able to do to help test those boundaries?
Yeah, sure. On the large list side, let's go ahead and just start right there. One of the things that we want to see is effectively you really push the boundaries of what a list can consume. So in SharePoint 2016, we talked about it a little bit at SharePoint Fest last week here in Seattle, but we really wanted to validate large list auto-indexing. So effectively, one of the key changes that we've made from a list boundary perspective is we've introduced a new timer job that's responsible for large list management. And effectively, the way that it works is that the large list management timer job will actually go out on a daily basis and it'll scan for lists that are growing. I believe in preview, it's going to look for a list that has about 2,500 items in it. And then as a result of discovering lists that are reaching a particular threshold, one of the things that it'll try to do is suppose a list has column A and column B, where A equals 1 and B equals 2. The large list management timer job will actually try to define where an index would be appropriate and then apply it to that list. So it kind of saves users from themselves because at the end of the day, most end users aren't familiar with indices and how to create them in the most appropriate place to create one, but our new timer job will manage some of that for you. The other thing as well is really what drove our large list boundaries in the past was we had implemented them in order to accommodate SQL lock escalations. So from a lock escalation perspective, once you reach that 5,000 item threshold, one of the things that happens is when you submit a query and it attempts to return all those results, a row lock escalates to a table lock, and that table lock subsequently blocks every other action against that content database. So you can imagine a number of users or site collections affected by a table lock. So in order to mitigate that, there's the new large list management timer job that will go out and proactively parse your lists and then define an appropriate place for an index in order to address those. On the large document side, one of the key improvements that we made there is we've moved beyond the 2 GB boundary, and that was feedback, it seems like, since 2003. And that was another kind of historical aspect of SharePoint. It was based on limitations that the SQL Server data type introduced, and in order to accommodate that, we hard-coded that boundary into the product itself. But now we're in a world where, like we talked about last week, where content is no longer represented in text in many cases. It's digital media, video, and audio. So file sizes are getting larger and larger just due to the way that we consume information. So what we decided to do was increase that boundary. You can, what we support today, and again, this is helpful for you to validate, is 10 GB file uploads. However, you'll notice in central administration, you can set that to any value above 10 GB as well. So that's kind of one of the key improvements. And then if you think about the number of content databases, you can have an inordinate number of site collections per content database as well. So we've really done a lot to address the challenge of scaling SharePoint. So in the past, SharePoint scale used to be a horizontal operation. You would add more servers, you would add more databases, you would add more web applications. And really what we're trying to do is turn it into something that scales vertically as opposed to something that scales horizontally. A question down here from Lambros regarding IS. Looks like my camera froze for a second. Yes, it does. Greater than 2 GB will work with that as well. And the beauty part is we just recently tested it with drag and drop using 5 gig files, and it performed excellently. But then again, we're on our bandwidth here, so I don't know how well it's going to work, anywhere else.
And you're also a user who is okay with just sitting and waiting while browser uploads a 5 GB ISO of your favorite movie, right?
Yeah, so one of the challenges is you have to always be cognizant of the impact on the end user as you start to increase some of these boundaries, because it is an upload and wait operation, and there's really no indication of what's occurring on the back end. So there's a lot of temptation to just close the browser assuming that it's not responding. So you really have to be cognizant of what the impact would be on end users, so test it against the bandwidth that's going to be representative of them. And then you also have to factor in if you're publishing your site to the internet, then it's going to become a little less predictable in terms of what the experience will be. So you always want to make sure that you address that as well.
Now back to the large list, because there have been a couple of additional questions. Ryan was asking about lists that might have 100,000 plus items already in place. What is the best way that we can test that large list scenario for you? Is it simply to go into the web application settings and set the threshold higher and higher and higher and see if it meets expectations?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that you can do. Is one, take your list, your native list, and without any modifications to that list, you can test 2 things at once. You can test upgrade and validate whether or not the large list upgraded, because most people equate upgrade failures to just size of a site collection, but the reality is database density has a huge impact on upgrades. You can have a relatively small site collection that has substantial depth in respect to the number of lists or list items that can affect an upgrade just as much as an inordinately large site collection. So one, validate the upgrade. And once the upgrade's been completed, run the timer job manually, and then check to see where the indexes were created against that particular list. So there's just some kind of validation of the way our timer job operates. And once you've gone beyond that, you can move into the next step, which is continue to increase those boundaries until you find a point to which it breaks or it becomes unresponsive, because we're really curious to see what those limits look like.
Fantastic. And sort of a related question from Ben, are there any updates to limit of lookup columns in the list?
We haven't necessarily done anything around that particular area. I would all of this is going to fall within some of the work that we've done from a list perspective. So I definitely encourage you to again, just extend some of these boundaries beyond what you could have done in SharePoint 2013 and then provide us the feedback. So great place to do that is either at our Twitter handle at SharePoint. You can definitely provide feedback that way. If you have a feature suggestion, obviously user voice is a great way to go. And then if it's technical discussion, then, provide your feedback via our forums. So we have all of our engineers actively monitoring our forums, and they're all willing to engage and participate. So definitely take advantage of those. And I've already seen a couple of questions that I've worked on helping to answer on our forums to date. So it would be great to see some more come in.
And tell us a little bit about the way the product is packaged right now. I know there are some questions on the Yammer IT Pro Network, which is another great resource for everyone, about Project Server. And is that actually incorporated into the product at this point, or where are we with Project Server preview?
So Project Server is now a native component of SharePoint Server 2016. When we release the product, obviously you still have to license Project Server separately, but it's just native to SharePoint Server 2016 as we move forward. So it's really bringing project and portfolio management closer to the content that a project manager actually creates. So having them as an integrated product just makes sense because you can take better advantage of project and portfolio management when it's placed side by side with that content that you anticipate creating. So we've really rolled those two things in together. And if you go to manage web applications, you can actually provision your new PWA, or if you go to manage PWA, it'll actually prompt you to create a project web app as well. So that's going to be something that is natively available in the preview and moving forward.
And similarly, are there any plans at this point, roadmaps as far as the timing for the Office web apps release in preview, obviously?
So that's actually something else that we're working on. We have a couple of things that we're working on landing over the course of the next week or two. We'll have a management pack available for SharePoint Server 2016. That's going to be one that you want to keep a lookout for. Obviously, we have the web apps as well. So there's still going to be a couple of more things that are kind of rolling out in succession beyond just getting the core product out.
Awesome. And I assume the Office client team is working on installations of InfoPath 2013 and SharePoint Designer 2013 that can actually be installed while you have Office 2016 on the same system. That's been a limitation to date, and I assume they're working on that right now.
Yeah, so, and that predominantly impacts the click-to-run installation. So if you have a InfoPath 2013 or a Designer 2013 MSI and you're using a click-to-run installation of the Office client, they don't run side by side. But the good news is we've already done the work to fix that. So as you work through some of the 2016 preview builds, you should be able to now take advantage of InfoPath and SharePoint Designer in side-by-side installations.
Awesome, fantastic. So tell us a little bit about the upgrade process, because that's obviously something you want feedback on. We're going to want to test in our environments. We're going to be doing a database attach upgrade as with the last upgrade to SharePoint 2013. And is there any equivalent, is there anything we need to worry about, first of all? And second of all, is there any equivalent to the legacy modes? Is there a 15 mode in SharePoint 16?
Yeah, so with upgrade, we've worked as much as we could to kind of simplify the upgrade process. And in the past, used to have a variety of different upgrade mechanisms available to you, whether that was a database attach upgrade. In other cases, it was deferred site collection upgrade. With SharePoint Server 2016, and speaking about preview, one of the things that you'll be able to do is take advantage of upgrade. The way that upgrade works is the prerequisite is to have SharePoint Server 2016, so you have to have that available to you. There is no baseline. So in the past, it used to be for the prior versions of SharePoint, you either had to have a service pack, a particular service pack applied, or be on a particular baseline before you could actually take advantage of upgrade. With 2016, you can upgrade directly from 2013 RTM, so we didn't establish a baseline for this particular release. Once, and in addition to that, any sites that you have running in backward compatible mode or SharePoint 2010 mode need to be upgraded to 2013 mode before you commit to upgrade. Once that's happened, it's effectively down to just database attach. That's really going to be our primary upgrade mechanism moving forward, is taking advantage of database attach upgrades to get to 2016. So really what we're trying to identify throughout the course of this particular preview release is how well is upgrade working, what's not working, what challenges are you running into. Now, in respect to backward compatibility, you can still leverage in 2016 a deferred site collection. So you can actually provision backward compatible sites still. It's not something that we necessarily recommend that you do, but it's something that you can definitely do. And at the end of the day, to date, the interface you're going to find is what we like to call, it's intuitive and familiar. So it's representative of a blend of the SharePoint 2013 experience and the SharePoint Online experience. So really, there's no substantial differentiation at this point from a user experience perspective to what you've had available to you in the past. And that was kind of one of the things that for preview we're trying to be cognizant of, because we've always heard feedback that with SharePoint upgrades, one of the blockers was just changes to the user experience, and that user's familiarity required training and process in order to bring them up to speed on the next generation of SharePoint. So we really wanted to build a familiar experience to mitigate some of the challenges that a user might face when you're upgrading to 2016.
If you click stop and restart, whether that'll kick your camera back into gear.
Oh, did I freeze?
Yep. Go ahead and restart. Got you back. Good. Moving on to some of the user-facing features or more business-facing features, and again, to emphasize to folks, this is an IT preview that is going to have a lot more functionality built in over time and more experiences, so we can drink our little shot. Bill, tell us a little bit about mobile and touch support in SharePoint Server 2016 IT preview.
Yeah, so one of the things that we accrued to 2016 was bringing the mobile touch experience from OneDrive for Business back to SharePoint Server 2016. So as one of our core pillars of investment that we talked about at Ignite was this concept of modern collaboration. One of those areas is obviously mobile, that facilitates a distributed workforce, a scenario that we're seeing more and more today across many organizations. So the low-hanging fruit was really taking what we already had available to us and then porting that to SharePoint Server 2016. So one of the key things about 2016 is you'll find a lot of the experiences that were available to you in 2013. So one of the key things that we wanted to do is we really avoided deprecating any experiences that existed in SharePoint 2013. We wanted to bring those forward for those individuals that enjoy those particular experiences. So stuff like performance point services and other capabilities. So you're going to find a lot of what defined 2013 available in 2016 because we avoided deprecation. And then on top of that, we're going to build some new stuff. So the way to think about it is we have a converged code base. So SharePoint 2016 is our first ever release of a converged code base. We've talked about this in the past where SharePoint was always driven by, SharePoint Online was always driven by our on-premises releases. We would build an on-prem product and we would deploy it ourselves to the service to enable Office 365 or BPOS, or even earlier than that, Microsoft Managed Solutions. In this case, we look to the cloud to define what SharePoint 2016 is, which means we actually took our SharePoint Online code base and then we backported capabilities that didn't exist in line, and then we shipped it out of there. So it's a very new process to us doing a converged code base. But as you can see, particularly on the infrastructure side, there's a lot of benefit because of that decision that accrues back to those who are looking at CapEx and OpEx as their primary drivers for moving to another generation of SharePoint.
Awesome. And also from the business side, tell us about the addition of the app launcher.
Yeah, so we have a lot of plans for the app launcher. You'll find that the app launcher is available today in SharePoint Server 2016 IT preview. And the idea behind that is the app launcher works really well to facilitate navigation, to get around SharePoint, to discover sites, to quickly identify sites, because we know that the SharePoint relationship between an individual and SharePoint is a one-to-many relationship, where you can be a member of many site collections. So what we've opted to do is, one, bring a lot of the capability in respect to site folders and site discovery through the Sites tab to SharePoint 2016 by virtue of the app launcher. It's also a quick way to discover news feeds and discover OneDrive for Business and generally just navigate around your SharePoint topology. One of the other things is that the app launcher is extensible, which means as you develop apps for on-premises, you can enable your users to pin those apps to the app launcher for easy discovery as well. So we're making it a lot easier to discover applications and then provision them across your organization. As we move forward in our hybrid experiences, the app launcher is really a way to draw parity between the navigation experience, whether you have a cloud version of SharePoint deployed or an on-prem version. So it's really going to drive some of the new hybrid experience as well. So the ability to have a hybrid navigation.
Fantastic. And I know you also are bringing one or more big chunk of business functionality into the IT preview, which is compliance and e-discovery tools. Do you want to talk a little bit about those enhancements?
Yeah, so a couple of things that we brought into that are new that you'll recognize inside of IT preview are a new compliance and a new policy center. So we have two different policy centers that exist in IT preview today. And effectively, one of the things around compliance and security is the ability to apply global policies to a set of information across your organization. So with these new policy and compliance centers, you can create document deletion policies based on a set of rules, or you can create in-place hold policies that are also based on a set of rules, or a combination of both. And then you can make those policies available across the organization. So they're organizational-wide policies. So effectively, one of the things that we got asked from a compliance manager's perspective was the past used to be defined by the necessity to create a customization to apply organizational-wide policies. And moving forward, you now have two policy centers, one for compliance and one for in-place holds, document deletion that you can actually apply organizationally across all of your SharePoint sites. So those are kind of some key investments around that as well.
Awesome. And last but not least, on my list of questions, and I know we've got some other ones from the audience as well, is search. Not only did you release SharePoint 2016 today, but it looks like you've dropped some bits for the cloud search service application, which you and Neil were kind enough to go into great detail about on a previous Tech Talk. So for those of you who are wanting deep dive on that, there's a Tech Talk on that from late June. But Bill, tell us about the status of the Cloud Search Service application, what we can do today, and what we might be able to do in about 2 weeks.
So from a Cloud Search Service application perspective, effectively what this hybrid cloud search is all about is the ability for you to define a singular index through which you discover information across both on-prem and Office 365. So our previous hybrid search investments were based on the concept of federated query, taking a query and submitting it to two locations, and then returning two individual sets of results back that you would have to refine and work with as discrete entities. So what we've done is with our new cloud hybrid search experience, we unify the index in Office 365. So now you're working against one unified index. But by virtue of having that index in Office 365, one of the other benefits that comes along with it is you can take advantage of the graph and delve experience now against your on-premises content, something that we demonstrated back in June on a Tech Talk, in addition to at Ignite in May in Chicago. So it's a really great way for you to take advantage of cloud innovation that doesn't require you to move everything to the cloud in order to take advantage of that innovation. So that actually shipped in the August cumulative update. The documentation you'll find in the link in the blog post in the very bottom FAQ portion. You can take a look at that. The service itself won't be open for configuration until all of the Azure components have been flighted across tenants, which is scheduled to be on September 7th. So I believe that's in the FAQ as well.
Awesome. And just so everyone knows here as well, I'm sure we'll be talking about the Cloud Search Service application on future Tech Talks. And Jason Himmelstein and Todd Klint, two great MVPs are in the community are also going to be talking about it in September. So we'll be announcing a webinar on that topic in September. So Bill, there's a bunch of questions in the chat as well. Many of them are related to things that are closer to the business. So a couple of quick questions: workflow, Vizio Services, and there was one other that I thought might be a sort of a quick hit. Support for content types across multiple site collections. Any changes on those three fronts?
So for workflow today, what you'll find in SharePoint Server 2016 preview is you're going to find that we carried forward Workflow Foundation and Workflow Manager to this particular release. We're going to enable the use, as we said, for forms and workflow of InfoPath and Designer 2013 client. So you're going to find IPFS in 2016 as well. And we're going to continue to do that as we continue to refine and formulate our workflow and forms strategies. So, nothing to announce today regarding forms and workflow. You can take advantage of the same capability that you had available to you in 2013, some of the same capability that exists in Office 365. And then as we move forward, we'll continue to revisit what our forms and workflow strategy looks like. So today it's Workflow Manager and Workflow Foundation. You continue to use some of the same tools that you were able to take advantage of in the past. And if you wanted to try upgrades against something like a K2 or an Intex or a third-party platform that builds workflow specifically for SharePoint, you can definitely test those out. My assumption is that those upgrades will be rather seamless just because the same core dependency exists, which is Workflow Manager and Workflow Foundation for those software partners taking advantage of that set of tooling.
Fantastic. And what about Vizio Services? There was a question about that. Any changes on Vizio Services?
Not off the top of my head that I'm aware of in preview for Vizio Services.
Okay. And what about on the ECM front? We had a question about any changes to the content type hub and how it integrates with multiple site collections. And then there was a second related ECM question on metadata and whether there's anything in the IT preview that synchronizes metadata between on-prem and in the cloud.
So a couple of things is on the content type question as well as the metadata question. The experiences that you'll find today are going to be very representative of what you had in 2013. It wasn't necessarily an area of focus in the IT preview. It doesn't mean that it's not an area of focus moving forward. So one of the things that we should probably say in caveat is that we talked about it on a previous Tech Talk, which is if it's not in IT preview, it doesn't mean it's not something that we're investing in. It's just not something that's in IT preview. Because IT preview has a specific set of scenarios that we wanted to be able to validate. We also wanted to be able to give you an opportunity to experience the product. So with that said, it's not going to be something that you're going to find invested in to a substantial degree other than performance and security and reliability fixes. But it doesn't necessarily mean it's not something that we're looking at moving forward. A couple of other questions that are popping up in the chat as I'm trying to watch that and talk to you at the same time is user profile service. What's changed? Well, one, in provisions. But
we'll believe that when we see it, Bill.
User profile service actually provisions itself very, very easily in SharePoint 2016 preview. We have decoupled a lot of technologies that we have on my camera froze. We decoupled a lot of technologies that we used to take advantage of, such as Forefront Identity Manager. So that's going to be a key change, is you're not going to find FIM for external synchronization available in the IT preview. Instead, what you'll find is the default way of enabling profile synchronization is going to be through Active Directory import. So it's really going to be that unidirectional approach to synchronization. As we move forward, you'll be able to take advantage of Microsoft Identity Manager as well as third-party products for bidirectional synchronization as well. But the idea was to decouple as many of those components that we took a dependency on as possible. So one of those was Forefront Identity Manager. The other one was SQL Express, which precluded not having a standalone installation available anymore. There was another question on remote blob storage. So you can definitely upgrade if you're in an RBS scenario. So if you're taking advantage of our file stream provider or you're taking advantage of a third-party provider, you can definitely upgrade to Preview where RDS is involved. And then SharePoint Server 2016 will also support remote blob storage as well. So that's not something that has been taken away. I'm still troubleshooting my camera.
No, I appreciate that, Bill. And we've got a good picture of you we can load up if you can't get that. Let's see, there was another one that I wanted to follow up. You got the user profiles. That was a big one. What about some of the interfaces? Are we going to see, other than PowerShell commandlets related to the net new features, are there any sort of additional coverage in PowerShell in the core product in the IT preview, and anything new in the developer interfaces? Does it have an API like Office 365, for example?
Yeah, so in respect to something like PowerShell, you'll notice that STS-ADM is deprecated. It doesn't mean that STS-ADM isn't there or that STS-ADM doesn't work. You can still leverage STS-ADM for those commands that you're not able to take advantage of using Windows PowerShell, and there's still a handful of those. So STS-ADM continues to exist, albeit in a deprecated form. Windows PowerShell is effectively the direction moving forward in respect to management operations. A couple of new things that you'll find that we talked about at SharePoint Fest was this concept of fast site collection creation. I believe we have that documented on our new SharePoint 2016 node on TechNet. We want people to take advantage of that, implement fast site creation, and let us know what the experience is there. So take a couple of sites and start with your standardized site collection creation as it existed in prior versions of SharePoint, and then try out fast site collection creation and let us know what that experience looks like as well. Now, there are going to be additional points of extensibility because there's new capability in SharePoint Server 2016. So you will definitely see those available to you as well. So for SharePoint Server 2016, obviously we have some new capabilities that we've introduced to the product. SharePoint Insights is a great example of one of those capabilities that we'd like you to take a look at. And I believe we have documentation on what Insights is as well.
Awesome, Bill. I know you've got a busy day, so before we tackle more questions, I wanted to find out what your timing was. You were able to jump in with us on the last minute for this. I want to be respectful of your timing. How much more time do you have?
I have probably another 15 minutes that we can chat.
Awesome. So can you tell us a little bit about the app experience? Is there anything we should be looking at in the IT preview that's new as far as how we configure and support and manage the app experience on-prem? For example, app domain. Yeah, I think
so you froze a couple of times, so I'll try to piece together what you were saying, and hopefully the question was about the app management experience in SharePoint 2016. So to date, at least in this particular build, from an app management experience, you're going to have a lot of the same capability available to you that you had available to you in SharePoint 2013. So the developer improvements are something that we're working on in parallel along with the experiences. And app management is what we consider one of our developer experiences. Some of the things that made it in is you'll find that app provisioning is a little more streamlined in SharePoint Server 2016 in respect to just resiliency. You're going to find that the common consent piece is something that we managed to get into preview, and then as we move forward, really the idea, and I talked about it on the Office Mechanics show at the very end on the blog, was the idea around extensibility with SharePoint 2016 that we're striving to achieve is that you can build a solution once and then you can deploy it anywhere, whether you're deployed in Office 365 or you're deployed on premises. So what we're going to be doing over consecutive releases as we march into RTM is really looking at taking advantage of a lot of the modern APIs that exist in Office 365, the files and calendaring APIs, and accruing those back to on-premises as well, while at the same time broadening the reach of our full trust code or our server object model. So our software vendors can take advantage of those and build great tools on top of SharePoint. And then in addition to that, it's really enabling our customers to take advantage of concepts like the cloud app model in a very simple way on-prem. So we know that provisioning environment and preparing an environment for the app model is challenging, but it's something that we're looking to continue to invest in making easier as we move forward through earlier releases.
Awesome. And what about, sorry, if there were too many questions going on at once, I just lost my thought. What about, I completely forgot the question I was going to ask. So some of the developer interfaces, and I know you mentioned they're potentially coming, but we did get a number of questions throughout the chat today about SAML, CSUM. Is there anything you can say about those specifically, or are those TBD?
Those are relatively, if it's something that you're not yet seeing in our documentation, it may be something that we haven't necessarily invested in yet. Identity is an important thing to us. If you go back and you kind of want to understand our identity vision, you can definitely look at the Ignite for IT Professional session we did in Chicago, and there was a specific portion of that which was on identity. So the identity scenarios again are going to be familiar scenarios to you. If you're familiar with SharePoint, you're familiar with claims, and then as we move forward, we're going to continue investing in identity scenarios that are kind of a modern cloud-driven approach. So one of the things that we talked about is we really want to get away from identity, Active Directory identity, and really move into cloud era. So it's really getting away from domain-based and into cloud era authentication. Now, Preview is not going to be representative of all the investments that we're making in that space. It's largely going to be indicative of those investments that we've made to shore up some of the challenges with 2013 and claims, as well as Kerberos and other concepts. But so really what Preview is exactly that, particularly IT Preview. It's really introducing some new capability that we really want to get some great validation on, while in parallel we continue to define future capability things that we're very concerned about, which is identity. Again, moving away from domain-based to cloud era, and user experiences, as well as building a great developer experience as well. So a couple of questions that are kind of popping in here and there. Is there some questions regarding edge support and ActiveX controls? That's something that we are very focused on. Today, you've probably experienced, if you've already deployed, that Edge doesn't provide a drag and drop opportunity for you with SharePoint document libraries. You always have to revert to Internet Explorer. Browser support is something that we're also working on as well. So it's not something that we're lost on. So we obviously there's Edge, and then you have Chrome dropping support for MP API. So at the same time, it's going to be you're going to face some of the same challenges, whether it's Edge or Chrome. It's something that we're working on. In Preview, there's going to be some cases where you still have to use IE because we're using a proprietary control in order to facilitate a specific operation, but it's something that we understand and that we know about.
And what about the lockstep between SharePoint and some of the other products in Microsoft these days under the new One Microsoft? For example, is the Explorer team and the OneDrive team moving forward with sort of supporting both the on-prem and the cloud document libraries and MySite libraries?
I'm sorry, what was that, Dan?
Is there anything that you can say at this point about where OneDrive and Explorer are going about supporting both the on-prem and cloud document libraries, both the site document libraries and the MySite OneDrive for Business?
Yeah, so that's something that we're definitely focused on directionally. So today you have effectively two flavors of OneDrive for Business. You have the one that exists inside of Office 365 today, and then you have the one that resides on premises. And for a long time, those two experiences themselves were relatively similar because they both had a solid foundation, which was beginning with SkyDrive Pro and then when we rebranded to OneDrive for Business. But effectively, both of them had their footing in the MySite concept inside of SharePoint. 2013 was kind of where we founded OneDrive for Business. OneDrive for Business obviously has evolved at a much more rapid pace inside of Office 365, so changes are coming in more fast and fluidly, whereas SharePoint Server 2016, at least IT Preview, is going to be representative of early OneDrive investments. So if you think about the early OneDrive investments in Office 365, you'll find some of those in OneDrive for Business on-premises in SharePoint Server 2016. And these two technologies are evolving at different paces, and we're doing as much as possible to try to accrue as much back to our on-premises customers where possible, but it's not going to be at that same rate of innovation to where you're getting updates on a regular basis. We're going to continue to update it, but the cadence is going to look a little bit differently just because of what the cloud enables versus what on-prem enables.
And there have been a couple of questions from some of our developer friends, including the great John Holliday, about branding. Are there any changes in the IT preview related to branding and look and feel?
From a branding perspective, not necessarily. So, branding is, again, another one of those concepts that falls in two places, and that's experiences as well as developer. And as we focus on this release, it was focused on infrastructure predominantly. We did introduce some new experiences as well as some developer experiences, but really what we're trying to do is, one, get that core infrastructure validation in place while at the same time working on the developer experiences as well as the end user experiences. That's kind of where the scope of branding falls within the way that we're building the product. You'll likely see some changes from a branding perspective. One of the things that you can try is, and that I've always been interested in, and it's not something that I've necessarily tried to take advantage of yet, is leveraging fast site creation outside of a base template. It's something that I have yet to try. So that would be interesting from a validation perspective.
So Bill, is that the concept that we can, for people who aren't familiar with that, you showed that off at SharePoint Fest Scouta last week. The idea is now, instead of creating a new site collection, applying a template, and SharePoint goes through all the work of throwing all the little switches, now you've got almost a master in a content database already, and it really becomes a copy operation. So it's significantly faster. And you were just saying that there's the possibility to actually create a custom master in this new model and then use fast site creation to deploy that?
Yep.
Very cool. I will be one who tries that very quickly. And so to round out the last 7 minutes here, let's bring it back to the IT audience and give them some guidance. First of all, to download the bits, where can they go? What's the URL to download the bits?
So the quickest way to find it is if you navigate to this morning's announcement and just grab the link from right there. You'll be able to quickly get it. If you don't have that available to you, you can actually use the short URL that we created, and I'm just trying to dig it up, so bear with me as I
just popped it in the window for you. I had it.
Okay, perfect. So you can leverage the short URL if you want to go that way, but take a look at the blog. You can grab the bits from there and get up and running with them. A little bit later this week, we'll have a image available in the platform gallery in Azure. So if you want to take advantage of a single server farm installation in Azure, keep an eye on that announcement a little later this week. So we'll have that available to you. So we're building out an Azure template in order to help you get up and running quickly with SharePoint. And basically, if you look at these download IDs at the very end, there's a 5-digit identifier at the end. 48712 is representative of 2016, the actual build itself. 48713 through 15 is actual corresponding documentation that we released. And then, so you just kind of keep watching those numbers incrementally, and you can keep an eye on what we're actually shipping around 2016. Little tip for you.
Fantastic. And you obviously are encouraging people not to install this in production, right? This is for test and lab environments.
Yeah, we definitely want you to use this for evaluation purposes, either in test or development scenario. So it's not something that you want to put in production. At least today, we're not going to support upgrading from preview to future releases of SharePoint Server 2016. Now, throughout the release cycle of our preview builds, you'll be able to upgrade those in place from one version to another version of preview, for example, but not from preview to RTM. That's just customary of the way that we've always done SharePoint. We don't want a lot of residual preview code left over when you reach RTM.
Fantastic. And that was actually one of my questions is what can we expect from a logistical standpoint with the upgrades as you're adding these new experiences and developer interfaces and surfaces? Will you be deploying those using the new SharePoint 2016 update model that you've been briefing us on past Tech Talks, where they will just deploy into the farm, zero downtime? What's your anticipation about what we'll be able to test and experience with updates?
Yeah, so well, we've gotten this far, which is basically getting the build itself out, and then one of the key areas that we're thinking about is how do we progressively update this build, and do we actually progressively update this build? So that's a decision that we've yet to make at this particular point in time, whether or not we'll actually supply updates for this particular build, or whether it'll become a static moment in time. Now, traditionally with evaluation and trial software, it is a static moment in time in most cases, to which the next viable release would be something like a release candidate. But we don't know yet whether or not we're going to take advantage of that. Now, if we do ship a build, it'll definitely take advantage of our new zero downtime investments that we've been talking about for a build-to-build upgrade or a version-to-version upgrade. So it'll take advantage of those concepts. So if we do elect to do something like that, to date, we're not quite sure if that's something we're going to do because it's not customary of our evaluation or our trial releases. But it's something that we're going to do. There was a couple of questions around release timing specifically. So I can tell you, one, we're not at a point yet to where we can discuss pricing or licensing or packaging or any of that. To kind of get that out of the way, but in respect to actual RTM, that's scheduled for spring of calendar year 2016. And so, like I said, there's going to be this long lead time where we have opportunity to do a lot of validation. So we still have another kind of key preview release coming in the future. We talked about that at Ignite. So we had three primary milestones as related to SharePoint 2016. One was our initial preview, which is IT preview, that's today. We then had a separate milestone, which was representative of a larger suite of investments, which would be representative of our release candidate in the future. And then, obviously, we have RTM. Now, in between that time, we don't know what that looks like, but we do know we're going to have three major milestones related to subsequent releases. The first being representative of IT investments. The second would be most likely representative of what you could expect in a final product, and then obviously a final product. So it's very much in line as previous releases of SharePoint have been, but as it stands, that kind of release schedule and those milestones, they are representative of the way that we've always done SharePoint releases in the past to a certain degree.
Fantastic. Well, I know we've hit the end of your time, Bill, and so I'd like to thank you once again for jumping on this very busy day and sharing this great information. Is there anything else, any other parting words of wisdom you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, so there is, looks like there's a lot of questions kind of coming through related to timing. It's definitely something, since we can't get to it today, I've got a couple of other meetings I need to run to, but one of the things is definitely hit us up on our SharePoint handle on Twitter. So find us at SharePoint and ask any questions that weren't able to get answered. The very next thing is if you have a technical question, and it looks like Ryan's pushing pretty hard on CSOM, we're definitely happy to answer those if you get those into the forum. And the reason I'm encouraging the use of the forum is because we can answer a question one time and address a much broader audience. So it gives everybody an opportunity to discover an answer to a question they may have had, as opposed to just kind of one-offs. So definitely post your questions there. We're actually looking at it much like we're looking at user voice. So it's something that we want to be able to take a look at. I have to give a special thanks to Bob, who has just been pounding his way through these questions as they've come through. So it's awesome having Bob here in order to help with that. And another cool thing is just to mention is I've actually got an old high school friend that attended today, which for most people doesn't sound odd, but considering I went to high school in Germany, you very, very infrequently come across high school friends. So that is pretty cool in itself. But like I said, definitely go out there, use user voice to provide product feedback. Now, like I said, today is indicative of what exists in preview, largely IT-centric. So if you don't see something, it doesn't mean that we're not doing it. So definitely make a recommendation on user voice if you're not seeing something that you anticipated. And we'll either answer with, hey, we're working on it, or hey, it's done, or it's something that we're thinking about, or it's something that we're not going to do. So it's a quick way to get your answer in respect to what features are there and what features you'd like to see. Use @SharePoint if you have, a quick question that maybe we can help answer real fast. And then lastly, definitely take advantage of the forums for any technical questions. Questions around identity. We have our devs that wrote that whole piece, sitting there waiting to answer questions in the forum, so everybody can take advantage of those same answers. So that's kind of the next thing. The other thing is have a look at hybrid.office.com, because that's going to be the other thing we announced today. That's going to be the place for all things Office 365 hybrid moving forward. So if you're interested in an announcement, check it out. If you want to find something related to hybrid, you're going to continue to see this site evolve over time. So that's kind of going to be your one place to find all those cool things hybrid. So that's kind of what recommendations that I would have is definitely provide your feedback, feature suggestions via user voice. Definitely participate in the forums if you have technical questions, so everybody can take advantage of the answer. And then lastly, leverage social media to get a hold of us. And then remember, this isn't representative of the final product. This is representative of where we're at today, which has, looking forward, has actually is very early in respect to when we anticipate shipping the product. So this is a very early preview, and we actually got it out earlier than we ever indicated that we would. So like I said, it's an opportunity for you to take a look at an early version of the product, representative of core foundational investments. We're hoping people like what we've done to date, particularly if you're in IT. And if you haven't, I would recommend taking a look at the new TechNet documentation for 2016, because there's a lot of new features and capabilities that are documented there as well. So, and then, it's kind of just to plug somebody else's blog, but if you look at Trevor Seward's blog, he's got a ton of stuff already on some of the new CDN work, as well as some of the new Azure ABS work that exists in 2016. So, Trevor discovered a lot of the little things, some of those, what, you could almost call an Easter egg that exists in SharePoint 2016 that aren't documented on TechNet, that we haven't documented, anywhere else before or talked about. So he's discovered a lot of these little tidbits like CDN support for static content. So there's a lot of cool stuff that he's already blogged about to date.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bill, for that long list of resources. We'll try and consolidate a lot of those into a guide to all of these different places you can go to get good information on IT Unity. So you'll find that on IT Unity over the next day. Also, we will be having another Tech Talk with Bill, as we have very regularly, and we will be announcing that Tech Talk basically just as soon as Bill and us can finalize the date. So that'll be probably in about 2 weeks right after Labor Day here in the US. So thank you, Bill. Thank you to the entire team at Microsoft for giving us this long opportunity to evaluate and validate SharePoint Server 2016. Thanks for your time. Thanks for the time of Bob and Neil, who's often on this show. Thank you all for attending, and thank you, Colligo, for making this possible. This Tech Talk with Bill Baer is sponsored by Colligo. And one last note is we did run into a couple of technical glitches today, obviously one of which was the room had a ceiling on it that people weren't getting through as far as registration. So if you know someone who wanted to see the Tech Talk and they weren't able to, we will be posting the recording to this very, very shortly, probably by the end of the day, so you can share this with your colleagues and friends. So Bill, thanks a million. I know you've got a lot to do. It was wonderful spending another hour with you.
Yeah, so like I said, parting thought, any questions that weren't answered, please bring those to the forums so I can have a look later today and we can have our engineers jump on there and get you your answers. So if they didn't get answered here at the Tech Talk, they'll definitely get answered. Just post them in a place where we can find them, and that's the place that we're looking. I got to apologize for all the technical glitches kind of on my side with camera and everything else. So the setup here is a little new to Tech Talks in the office, so unfortunately it wasn't quite ready for this today. But yeah, and thanks for having me, Dan. And I'm hoping everybody takes advantage of getting it installed and providing as much feedback as possible, because we're going to leverage that feedback and continue to make this thing better and better.
Awesome. We'll see you all on the next Tech Talk when we dive into one of the core features of SharePoint 2016. Take care, everybody.